collaboration with the Cyprus Mail, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
Coming up on the programme this week, we'll continue our chat with Israeli-born musician, author and philosopher Gilad Atzmon.
It would be very refreshing to see Jews realizing the disaster that they are bringing on themselves, to acknowledge that something is not right.
And we'll hear about an important extension to the Cyprus American Archaeological Research Institute in Nicosia.
This triples, or more than triples, the capacity of our storage for our books, which now number at over 20,000 individual items.
The Cyprus American Archaeological Research Institute, or CARI as it's better known, is in an old house in the centre of Nicosia. It's part of our archaeological framework. It's been here for many, many years. And although the building it's in is listed, they did need to expand. That caused a few problems. How have they done it? Because they needed more space for their library. Joining us is Andrew McCarthy, CARI's director, to tell us about an upcoming inauguration in just a couple of weeks of the brand new facility. Andrew, tell us a bit about how you came to get the permission to build this extension, and I guess it's going to make a huge difference to all the people who come and use the facilities at CARI, isn't it?
Well, yes. CARI has been around since the late 1970s, 1978, when it was inhabited just a small rented accommodation in a high-rise. And in 1991, we moved into this historic building, which was a lovely new facility and has residence capabilities and laboratory space, and we started expanding and collecting for our library. But as a historic building, we cannot alter the appearance of the building. And so when we're now at the point where we've reached capacity of the number of books we can add to our library. And without going off-site, building a new facility in another location, our options were limited. So the former mayor of Nicosia, Lelos Dimitriades, who's been a long-time friend of CARI, came up with the idea of going underground. And this was really a revolutionary way of thinking about things. We're not altering the building, the facade, the look of it, apart from a staircase that connects from the existing building and has very little intervention on the building itself, and connects to a 2-story below-ground basement, a library storage facility. This triples, or more than triples, the capacity of our storage for our books, which now number at over 20,000 individual items. And I estimate that it took us about 25 years to reach this level of books that we have in our collection. And with that in mind, we should be okay for space for the next probably 40, 60, maybe even 80 years. But by that time, what will a library look like? So for the moment, we're keeping our options open about what we're going to do with this space, but in the meantime, we're moving some of our collection to the basement, which features state-of-the-art fire suppression system, security system, and climate control. So our collection will be far better served for protection and storage, and also availability to researchers studying the archaeology and history of Cyprus.
I'm assuming that some of the books are very old and very valuable, but of course in this day and age I suppose a lot of new stuff coming in is digital.
That's absolutely correct. We do have a rather small collection of extremely valuable and rare items, and they are actually used on a fairly regular basis by our scholars. There are certain things like the Kitchener map from the late 19th century, which there are very few copies of. These are things that need to be studied in detail by people because this is one of the earliest professional surveys of the island, and a lot of this information just doesn't exist anymore.
And of course his theodolite is down the road at the CVAR.
That's exactly right, yes. That's right. And so we are undertaking a campaign of digitizing some of our resources, especially some of these ones that are rare and valuable, because they'll actually be more useful to people digitized.
And they take up much less space.
And they take up much less space. But also, that means that we, with more digitized resources, will have to create infrastructure for accessing those digital resources, both the ones that we have and the changing face of publications these days. So that's one of the reasons why we're keeping our options open, and we're not filling our basements yet. We're actually going to be seeing where the next 20 or 40 years will be taking scholarship, and we'll be able to respond to the changing needs of researchers with a new expanded facility.
Who funds CARI?
Well, we're a non-profit organization, 501c3 in the United States, and we're a registered charitable organization here in Cyprus as well. Through that explanation, you might recognize that we're largely donor-funded. We do receive some money from the United States government, both the Department of Education and the U.S. State Department's Educational and Cultural Affairs Division.
And I presume that you get a lot of students of archaeology from the States coming over.
We do, but because CARI is the only institute of its kind in Cyprus, we actually fill the role of the foreign institute for anybody from any country in the world, including Cyprus. If you go to some places like Italy or Greece or Egypt, you'll encounter institutes from many countries, but that doesn't exist in Cyprus. We are both American but also truly international, and we have been around long enough now that we've just are woven into the fabric of archaeological work here on the island. So Cypriot archaeologists who are excellent also use our facilities, and we try to coordinate with them and to help them, as well as Americans and other international scholars and students.
And that's Andrew McCarthy, Director of the Cyprus American Archaeological Research Institute, or CARI, talking about the inauguration of their extended library facility.
This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
On last week's programme, we spoke at length to Gilad Atzmon. He's an Israeli-born author, musician and philosopher, and we discussed the situation in the Middle East, his music and his books. We didn't have time for the whole of the chat on last week's programme, so let's pick it up where we left off, talking about the conflict in Palestine. What is the answer? Is there an answer? Because I do detect, globally and particularly on popular media and social media, a change in attitude, particularly since the last operation in Gaza. That seems to have, in a sense, brought people up short. I know it brought me up short to realise exactly what was going on. Perhaps it was just that prior to that we hadn't been quite so exposed through social media to what was actually happening on the ground because of the well-known mainstream media blackout on a lot of this stuff.
I will help you out.
Has
here.
it changed?
Yeah.
And if it hasn't, what needs to happen to make it change?
Okay, to start with, I'm not an activist. I'm a philosopher. I'm a thinker. My job is not to provide you with answers, but instead to try to help you to refine the questions. I believe that once we understand what the questions are, we then can come up with different answers and may even be contradicting answers. So, for instance, rather than talking about Israel and Zionism, let's call Israel for what it is. Israel defines itself as the Jewish state. If Israel defines itself as the Jewish state, the first questions that we have to ask are, who are the Jews? What is Judaism? And what is Jewishness?
But it seems that no Jews can agree on that, because you talk about...
One minute, I'm going to address it. Who are the Jews? What is Judaism? And what is Jewishness? How these three terms relate to each other? How do they relate to Jewish politics, Israeli politics, Zionist politics, and so on and so on? Now, you are right. These questions are pretty much prohibited. So Israel calls itself the Jewish state, and we are not entitled to ask what Jewishness stands for. This is why I came to the conclusion that first we have to define what Jewish power is all about. Jewish power is the power to stop you asking what is Jewish power. It is a silencing mechanism, and this is exactly what I am doing. I am defining this unique kind of racially oriented, Jews are not race, but their politics is more than often racist. I try to provide analysis of this matrix of racist ideologies that are supremacist and tribally oriented. And I guess that if I have to judge by the amount of opposition I face, I probably do a good job.
But we're back to, is there an answer to stopping the killing, to coming to some sort of agreement with the Palestinians so that both the Jewish people and the Palestinians, and indeed the Christians and all the other people who live in that area, can look forward to a peaceful future for their grandchildren?
Let me tell you something that you're not going to like, if you don't mind. But I think that you would have to agree with me. I think that more and more people understand now that what we see in Palestine is just a symptom. By now, we are all Palestinians. You are a Palestinian. I'm a Palestinian. We are seeing the Jewish lobby buying the Labour Party, so people in Britain cannot actually tell the truth about Jewish power, about Jewish history. Ken Livingstone was expelled or suspended from the party for telling the truth about Hitler and his collaboration with Zionists in 1933. This situation is ridiculous, and I'm actually very, very happy, because it is very difficult to deliver the truth about Palestine through The Guardian, because now The Guardian is the guardian of Judea. It's impossible to see the truth when you watch the BBC for the same reason. It's fine. You don't have to look at Palestine. You don't have to watch the BBC. Look what they're doing in Britain. Look how the Congress groveled to Benjamin Netanyahu. So I'm actually welcoming Jewish power celebrating itself, because this is the only way people can see how devastating the situation is. I think that we are on the very positive path towards enlightenment.
And with enlightenment, you hope for what?
I prefer not to think about it. Ideally, and this is Gilad Atzmon, ideally, it would be very refreshing to see Jews realizing the disaster that they are bringing on themselves, to acknowledge that something is not right. And these things happened a few times in the past. I'll give you one example. There was a guy, 2016 years ago he was around, his name was Jesus Christ. And he realized that something was wrong. And he said, Can we just love our neighbor? Can we just learn to turn the other cheek? You know what happened to him. Zionism, when it told the truth about the Jews, when it was really anti-Semitic, it was extremely unpopular amongst Jews. So ideally, I would have loved to see Jews turning away, but I don't think that this is going to happen. I think, and this is very devastating, I think that they are working hard, some of them at least, bringing a disaster on themselves. But this is the nature of history. I was born in 1963. The Holocaust wasn't a big thing in Israel at the time, you have to understand. It became a big thing. People say, there are some discussions between historians maybe after 77 when Menachem Begin became the president. He was kind of a more Holocaust-oriented leader. He was Polish himself, kind of escaped. And last minute, anyway. But when I started to look into the Holocaust, I could never understand at the time as a kid how it could happen. What these Jews had to do to bring such a disaster on themselves, I never understood it. And when I look at Israeli politics, when I look at Jewish extensive lobbying, when I look at Bibi Netanyahu speaking in front of the Congress against the will of the president, when I look at the British Labour and its capitulation, I understand that there is something within Jewish identity politics that is set to bring those kind of disasters on Jews, and so many Jews are innocent and have nothing to do with it. This is totally clear. Even Israelis, many Israelis, I don't want to say most, I don't want to talk about statistics, have nothing to do with this moronic behavior. Now, if you really want to understand what is going on, it is very possible that those disasters that happen to the Jews so often are inherent to the Jewish existence. Because when you look at it, they gained a lot out of the Holocaust. If there wasn't an Holocaust, there wouldn't be Israel. They learned to translate this pain into a lot of money, reparation money. They managed to translate German, American, British guilt into a huge political power. It is quite devastating because if they are suicidal, or if they have this suicidal element within their culture, it is a big problem for them. But the problem is that when it happens, many other people also die. And the only thing that I can do is to tell the truth as I see it. I don't claim to know the truth. I'm quite effective in detecting lies. I want to believe that what I'm saying is the truth, and I want to believe that by saying it, I may manage to deliver a message and maybe to help people to understand what is happening there, but also to help Jews how dangerous the game their politicians are involved with.
If we can come very quickly, I know I can't keep you much longer,
No, it's okay.
to your books, because you've written a novel, Guide to the Perplexed, and My One and Only Love, and also I've read about A to Zion, the definitive Israeli lexicon.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the writings that you've got out there and where people can get hold of them.
You missed the Wandering Goo. That is obviously my most controversial book. It's a book that was endorsed by the most important humanists, basically, or some of the most important humanists on this planet. And I got a lot of flack for this book, but in this book I try to ask, what is that thing called Jew? We are going to play this tune, what is that thing called love? You know, yeah, at a certain stage in my life it was quite a surprise for me. I realized that I could write, because as a kid I'm kind of dyslexic, and I cannot, even when I write, I cannot read my handwriting. Once I had a computer, and it was pretty much as early as computers were available for ordinary people. I was the first one to buy one. And I started to write, and I really enjoyed it. And at a certain stage, I think when 93, 94, when I moved to England, I was probably slightly bored, and I wrote this book. Basically, I sent it by fax to every night. I sent another chapter to a friend, to a few friends actually, and they really liked it, and I never did anything with it. And I found it by mistake 6 years later, in 2001 or 2002, and I started to read it, and I thought that it was hilarious. I was doing my PhD in philosophy in England at the time. It was written in Hebrew, and I sent it to an Israeli publisher, and within 3 hours I had an offer. I then somebody bought the options to make it into a film, and they translated 30 pages, and I found a literary agent. She's still my literary agent, and she managed within the next 2 months to sell it in 26 languages, just based on these 30 pages. She herself, she didn't see the book. It was very funny. It was full with sex. I was very young. I was very horny. Thanks God, I'm getting older. I can think about other things but women. Then I wrote a second book because I wasn't sure that I was a real writer, because it was so successful. I was traveling all over the world, and they regarded me actually as a good Jew. And I was really annoyed by it, because I wasn't a good Jew. I never been a proper Jew. When you're an Israeli, my generation, we didn't see ourselves as proper Jews. We were not religious, so we were kind of living on the land. We were kind of secular. So I thought, I'm not a good Jew. I don't even want to be good. So I wrote another book. It was slightly strange. Some people thought that it was very, very important text. Other people thought that it was a very a disgrace form of total disaster in terms of literature. And at that stage, in 2002, 2003, 4, 5, I really lost any interest in fictional writing. I started to write more and more papers about Jewish identity, about Jewish politics. I really wanted to understand it. I think that it's a fascinating subject. It is a fascinating subject. People who every 70 years have a Holocaust. It's incredible. It's unique. And they are very clever, and still they don't learn, or maybe they learn and they hide the knowledge. I don't know. It's very interesting. And I then published The Wandering Who. The Wandering Who was a big bestseller. It was translated into many languages. It is an attempt to understand what is really going in there. With this unique identity, it delves into the power, the matrix of power, the role of the Jewish left, which is beyond dishonest. And then a few months ago, I published this A to Zion. A to Zion is a very, very funny book. It is basically The Wandering Goo in 5 minutes. It's basically a toilet book. It's full with cartoons that were made by my great friend Enzo Apicella, the Italian cartoonist. He's now 96 years old. We had the launch in New York the other day, and he's full with life. The book was actually his idea. I'm very good in summarizing kind of big concept, big term, big ideas into one sentence, what you call aphorism. So
it's very tongue-in-cheek, though, isn't it?
Yeah. So, you have anti-Semites. Nobody knows what anti-Semites are. Anti-Semites are, according to the book, brutally honest people, usually of Jewish origin. Bar mitzvah, do you know what bar mitzvah is?
I read that one too, yes.
Bar mitzvah, I think, is the moment when the male Jew accepts that his foreskin is not going to grow back. Land of Canaan, the land of milking money. And so on and so on. Adolf, not a common name for a newborn in Europe. Arabs, people who were invented to thrust into the sea. It's basically all my ideas condensed into a
very small book.
Very small book, yeah.
They can get these through your website?
They can get it on Amazon, in America, in Britain, in pretty much everywhere else. You can always you have a good chance to get it in my gigs if I remember to take them. It's a funny book, by the way. I didn't get any flack for this book, which
was a surprise to you, I imagine.
It's disappointing. It's disappointing because the way I work, I say a few things and then Jews get annoyed and make sure that everyone else know what I have in mind, My entire PR campaign was based on those people being annoyed. And I think that they realize it, and I didn't find yet the appropriate system to distribute my ideas. May have to start to annoy other people.
You mentioned the gig, it's coming up pretty shortly.
Yeah.
A final word then about your music and where it's taking you now, because it's been a long journey. You've covered so many different types of music, and I think you sometimes switch sort of world music into the jazz, and so it's a real amalgam, I think, of many different genres.
Yeah, I think that the great news of the day is that the music industry is pretty much dead, which means that we are totally free. We can play whatever we like, we can do whatever we want. We are not committed to a genre or a style. Our job is to produce beauty. Beauty spreads happiness and peace. But more than anything else, I do believe that the artist, the real artist, is the most important person around. Because our job as artists is to introduce an alternative reality. And this is what I try to do with my music, with my writing, with being there. Some people say about me, and it's true, people go to work in the morning, they go to make cars, build houses, work in the radio, and so on and so on. All I do for a living is being me. I wake up in the morning, and by 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the night, or 12 o'clock in the night, all I do during the entire day is being Gilad Atzmon, writing and making music.
And making wonderful music.
Thank you so much.
Well, you've said the music industry is dead. In actual fact, the industry might be, but I don't think I've ever seen more people all over the world who go to live music, concerts and shows.
I agree
the one
with you.
You're going to do tonight is in a very cosy space.
It's beautiful. I love it.
So it's so much more intimate. It's so much more, in a sense, a sharing of your philosophy.
Yeah, I never liked doing big festivals, which I do, obviously, but I really like to see every person in my audience and to see the impact when I'm with my eyes open. Usually, most of the time they're closed when I play. To feel the vibe of a room, to let my saxophone resonate through the walls, something that I never get, when the other day I played in a massive place. It's just all through microphones, and I really like acoustics. This is the truth of this art form. We waves that shake and things around them.
And communicate.
Yeah.
Well, Gilad Atzmon has been talking to us. He's in Cyprus for several concerts. He also gave a seminar, and I'm pretty sure he will be back again. We didn't even talk about his work with Ian Dury and the Blockheads, and you need to go to gileadatzmon.com, I think, and find out more about an extraordinary man and join him next time he's in Nicosia.
Thank you so much. It was a lot of fun talking to you.
Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.